Okay, so after the take back to the text, the Teiku. The Teiku. Suffix she topic atam b'shum davar halacha. When there's a question, we're not sure about something with some halachic issue. Then you'll deal with shiva love, and we don't know how to respond to it. The tishar halacha b'suffix remains the halacha remains in doubt. Imu binyan mamona mamon lekula. Suffix of mamon, we go lekula. We go leniently. Question exactly it means the kula because we say by moment whatever is a kula for one guy is a chumrah for the other guy. So the Yavetz here says, larger the Yavetz says lanitva. In other words, gimel. The Yavetz says lanitva. So it means we say that the tovea, the claimant, if it's a case of teiku, he can't extract the claim from the person against whom he's making the claim. We go leniently for the person who is being attacked. Even though, of course, that comes out, it's a cool for him, but a kumar for the other guy. But that is where we paskin on this situation, right? That's we go. We're basically based on the principle of hamotz mechaber lavaraya. You didn't bring a proof. A teiku is not enough of a proof to get your money. Isura l'chumra. It's a matter of isra to l'chumra. It's interesting because I think that by this rabbanon we will go l'kula. So subject the rice he has to go to chumrah, but I'm not sure if a takeaway subject the rabbanon we go to chumrah. I don't think that would be the case. If you have money which is in doubt, right? So we're going on to the talis. Well, we have no clear-cut way of resolving this issue. Then they end up because they end up in a teiku, so they divide up equally. Some say hamotz mechaber lavaraya, which I'm not sure how much different it is in most cases, but that means that whatever each person is holding on to, in the case of teiku, they get to hold on to because hamotz mechaber lavaraya, the other person has to bring a proof. B'davar isser hetek shiavo asafek hazeh, and a matter of isser hetek, which seems to be exactly what we're talking about a few more, 2 lines ago. When it comes to this isser yamadel isser, you should again assume that's also, which I'm not sure why he's repeating himself on this. But the Yavetz does make the point I made before. In Dalit, the Shel Torah, the Safek Shel Divreim L'Hakel Chutzmi Miktzatz Protim, except for rare occasions, obviously by Safek Divreim we go to Kula, even by Teiku. I'd like to point out that perhaps most people know this, perhaps not. That which people say that Teiku means is an abbreviation for Tishbi Yana Kushos Ubayos, that the Elio, when he comes, will resolve questions and queries. That's a nice drush, but that's not what the word Teiku actually means. The word Teiku means it stands. In other words, the issue is not unresolved. Okay, so that word Teiku, even though it's a nice thing to say that it's an abbreviation, that's not the actual meaning of the word. The shinui. A shinui is a resolution. It's when people argue on a certain stage. Yeshana, and he's going to resolve it. In order to extricate himself from the disagreement, will hold time as well to sustain his words. So if somebody argues for the Mishnah, he has to definitely sustain his perspective with a definite proof, because otherwise I don't know what right he has to argue in a Mishnah. The Siman Shonui and Shinui and the sign of a resolution. If you want to, when the Gemara is providing a resolution to an issue where there was a machlekes, it says Hamani Rabbi Pliny here, and that's users nice as well. In other words, you say Hamani, this Mishnah, which says that you need to have, let's say I had this last night again. This Mishnah says that if Adim are not signed on the get, it's not valid get. That's Rabbi Meir here, right? That's Rabbi Meir. We pass like Rabbi Eliezer. So that's a shinui. What are you going to do with that Mishnah that says you need without Adim to get his puzzle? Hamani, Rabbi Meir, and we're able to pass like Rabbi Eliezer. So that's a shinui. Okay. Now, perhaps this is the next paragraph is perhaps the most famous paragraph in this Mavo. It's not perhaps, it's definitely the most famous paragraph in this Mavo, because it is very scandalous. He says, V'agada, which we normally say as Aggadata, but it's the same thing. Aggadata. Who called Perush, Mavo HaTalmud Shum Inyan. It's anything which comes in the Gemara on any matter. Shelo yeh mitzvah, where there's no mitzvah involved. Zui Aggadata. Ein l'chol yimod mimena ela ma sheyara haladas. You can't learn anything from it except that which is reasonable, so to speak, common sense. Can you hold on a second? I have to answer this call. Okay, so you can only learn things which you can understand. In other words, Aggadata is full of strange things, right? And you can only learn from Aggadata whatever you can understand, which very often will be very little.
So therefore, that begs the question of why is there Aggadata in the Gemara?
Yeah, well, the greater question, in my opinion, is why there are folk cures in the Gemara. So the answer for both is that the Gemara is not meant to be halachic work. Gemara is meant to be a comprehensive perusal of the lore of the time of the Amoraim, excluding significant areas which obviously are in other books. But it wasn't meant to be exclusively halacha. That's not the purpose of it. The purpose of it is to provide a balance of topics which make for a well-rounded person. Well-rounded Talmid Chacham.
Okay.
So obviously, Aggadata, there's a lot of Aggadata which you can understand. And if you're the Maharal, you can understand all the Aggadata, right? You have no problem. It's just everybody's different. So you can only take the Mashiach al-Adas. Okay?
Okay.
It's still controversial, obviously, because it sounds like it's, okay, you don't have to take it all, so take it or leave it. Yesh ladat, you should know, shekol ma, shekimu chazal halacha, be'inen mitzvah, shemipi Moshe Rabbeinu lava shalom, shekibel, mipi agvura, ein l'chol sifa lava lo ligra mimenu. Anyway, which is halacha, is a Mesorah. Going back to Moshe Rabbeinu, you can't add or detract from it. And that was taken to be etched in stone.
Right.
Aval mashipushim of psukim. That which they interpreted psukim. Kol echad. Kimash damidlo umashro badaito. So he says the pshatim and psukim which you find in Aggadata. It's really required. Is the Kal V'chomer, the stuff which is just on the Medrash, not in the Gemara, is all what these Abu Chachamim saw in the Psukim based on their own interpretive styles, and it's not part of Torah. It's not. I shouldn't say it's not part of Torah Shpal Peh. What I was about to say, it's not part of the Mesorah, Torah Shpal Peh, but it's not part of the Mesorah, and therefore it is not something which you can learn from directly, halacha, and even Aggadata itself. It has to be something which you can understand. Otherwise, since it's the private drasha of that Tana or that Amora, it's not something which you have to or should necessarily even incorporate into your framework.
Okay.
It's a very radical Torah paragraph. This is what, that's why I said it's very famous or infamous paragraph, from your perspective. Okay. Ufi mashiyalam minadas minapirush me'elu lomdim. That which a person can grasp from these commentaries we learn. The others we do not rely on them. So it's interesting. There's a a famous perspective taken by the Ramban in the Maimar Vikuach in his debate with Pablo Cristiani, the Meshumad who debated him in Barcelona in 1263. So the Rambam does answer all Pablo's questions from Aggadata. Pablo's Chiddush, I should say. We'll back to the Pablo's Chiddush should be above and beyond all other prior debaters was that he was not going to prove the truth of Christianity from the Psukim. He was going to prove the truth of Christianity from the Talmud. And his goal was to prove that the sages of the Talmud all believed that Mashiach already came. Okay, so that Messiah
that's a hard sell.
Was a hard sell, and he didn't do particularly, at least according to Ramban's account, he didn't do a particularly good job. According to their accounts, according to his own account, he did a good job, but the thing is, there are no details. He just said, I creamed it, basically, without giving any details about what his great proofs were. So yeah, it is a very hard sell. So, but the Ramban, even though he answered all Pablo's assertions from different Aggadatas, he said, listen, you should know in general, Aggadata he uses actually the word sermons, are sermons of the individual rabbis. And therefore, I'm not required to accept or even to interpret Aggadata in any way, shape, or form. If you like the sermon, you like the sermon. If you don't like the sermon, you don't like the sermon. But I'm not responsible for it. Nevertheless, he goes on to answer those questions. But it's a similar idea to the Rabbi Shmuel HaNaggid here. Now, Ramban is not Rabbi Shmuel HaNaggid. We don't know that much about it necessarily, but we know a lot about the Ramban. We know the Ramban was a Mekubal. I know he took all the Aggadata to Chazal serious. But it's not. If Chazal in Aggadata doesn't make sense to you, then you're not allowed to assume you understand it and act accordingly. Okay? So yeah, so that is the Aggadata. Does not fit. You don't learn it except what is Oila ala Das. On the other hand, Hora, was Shmuel, Hora is a directive, is a Shmuel, in other words, a sugya which was passed down, which became a new idea crystallized by Chachamim, the kilos umidrashos in their congregations and in their yeshivas, being a mitzvah as to how a certain mitzvah should be fulfilled, really creates a law, and that's called the law, and that is of course binding, because even though it's made by the Chachamim, came up with their own thoughts very often, and their own employed their own logic. Nevertheless, since it was something which is the Chachamim were mevarer together in the yeshiva, and they defined it as best they could, and in terms of Shah, usually very clear and obvious. So therefore, that is a psak halacha which we abide by.
Okay.
Okay, so we're going to go back to the Kitzur Klallim on the top here, where he really deviates a lot from what's in the. Actually, maybe since that's the case, let me go further in the. Let's do. Okay, so at this point, the Kitzur Klallim is really deviating from the text of Shmuel HaNaggid, and is going into all sorts of other issues. So,
were you reading?
Haminag.
Okay.
Haminag shamu mevata halacha. It's a concept that minhag negates halacha. That's a dafka minhag vatiki. It's an ancient minhag, a minhag which is well grounded. Minhag she'en lo raya v'lo tam minhag tos. You can't just say any minhag is mevata halacha, right? If you have a minhag which has no solid grounding, the fact that people are knowing that, there's a famous word that minhag is Rashi Tevis, is the same letters, as Gehenim. So certain minhagim will land you straight in Gehenim. But it has to be a minhag vasikin in order for it to be effective, valid. Okay, the Chachamim say that we're always machmin shurim, but that is only in Mishnah Brayta, not name. I don't know why not, because we have to do Rabbanan, but he's contending that has to do with the words of an Amboira or the words of a Tana. And a Tana.
What kind of example? What kind of example is he talking about?
Well, if you had, let's say, here to talk about, it's a good question. Well, let's try to Google Ador and see what he says about this.
Depends when we have mechsu, mechsa, tame, or things like that.
What?
Like if we have a
It could be.
kalim, mechsu, mechsa.
Yeah, it could be that that's an
The
example.
akol tame or things like that.
Yes. Okay. Okay, so yeah, you can see my screen, right?
Yes, I can see your screen.
Okay, so here we have the Chulin Daf Nun Hey. Shurim Bichtei Sikas Chatan Ba'aglog, etc., etc. So this is yeah. So it says here, Kol Amar Revo Amar Rabbi Yochanan Kol Shur Chachamim Lahachmir Chutz Mikegris Shel Kesamim Lahakel. So Gris Shel Kesamim means the size of a dime for the kesem for nida. So evidently this shear was given by in a Gemara, not in a Mishnah. It was given in a Gemara, not in a Mishnah, so therefore going to be Mekel.
Okay.
Okay. So I assume that's what he's talking about. Let's see here. Kosher is Rashi. Kosher Lachmir. Im Tzumtzum Chumro Sharim Im Tzumtzum Im Tzumtzum Kula Sharim B'Shoichek. Whatever is considered to be more Chumra, except for Kesem Sham Shal Nida. Time of Shumik Samim Matzim Durabanan to be the right side of the Chazim Gupa. He doesn't say this thing about the idea of an Amora. He just says because it's Durabanan. But I guess it's any shear which is given by Amora, not in the Mishnah, according to the Mavo, is a shear which is going to be Lukula, not Lukumra.
Okay.
When they say cloud God, they say a cloud. The general principle. We don't learn from that. There's always exceptions, right? Really finds exceptions. They say you show him their Kitzur. Because they learned in a very, very terse way. But the Amoraim have a cloud, they're specific, they mean it. They're Hamor Farish. Because an Amora is supposed to explain if he doesn't mean precisely what he's saying. So Mishnah sacrificed clarity for the purpose of memory. And Amoraim don't do that. The locate result. Because if that was not the case, there'd be no end. We could never rely on the Gemara, which is edited in front of us, Sheruba Kolos, which is mostly based on generalization, general principles. Because of our Radberg, you should also where we don't find an explicit exception to the rules. We like all the Klallim could go, such as the classic example is Ploni halacha kaploni. The cloud that halacha is going so we observe unless we have strong evidence to the contrary.
Okay.
Parrots masnisim Ploni who when he had said this mission is so and so. The source of Tanakh say halacha came. Since it's a Stam Mishnah, which we just identified the author, but it's a Stam Mishnah. So we say Pascal like that Stam Mishnah, because otherwise the Tana would not have left out who the author of the Mishnah was. I would say the opposite. Mishnah is a das yochi, and halacha is not like that Mishnah. And the beautiful thing, of course, I'm being a bit sarcastic here, but the beautiful thing is that we're not given here intrinsically the tools to differentiate. But sometimes when it says for masnis and plain, it means if that's halacha, then it says that means it's not halacha, and obviously you have to have a certain degree of acumen in order to figure out which is which.
Okay.
Okay. Divei term, divei kabbalah lo yafina. Divei term teras Moshe. Divei kabbalah din erbiyim. Shkibu rach hakodesh kol nevuah l'fi tzarach hashah v'ador v'amaisa. Okay, so since that's really a reason. Since Divrei Nevi'im are things that they are makabel kodesh in for the need of the time and the needs of the generation and what was going on, so therefore we can't learn from them halacha because halacha is eternal, and the Nevi'im were by definition talking about the necessary needs of their generation. This is a little base. Okay, not important. That's not the actual source halacha. It was just coming to reveal the content of a certain thing. To indicate that the pasuk is talking about this kind of things. And because that we have from Yechezkel, right? Yechezkel is Divrei Kabbalah. But we learned what the custom was, how they conduct themselves in terms of Hilchos Habeilus back then. Let's see, Aleph. Nothing important here. Okay. Tikkun Sofri. This is another very controversial one. Maybe we should leave this for next time. Okay. Tikkun Sofri is tough. It borders on. Okay, we'll leave it for next time. This is controversial. All right. Have a great week. Don't say anything over that next time. Okay. Take care.
All right. Bye-bye.